Well, I'm Lord Willis, the chair of the House of Lords Sport and Recreation Committee. Occasionally you have a select committee report that's important. Occasionally you have them which are highly relevant. On this occasion, we have a report which in fact could fundamentally change the way in which Britain looks at, particularly England looks at, the way in which we deliver sport and recreation and health and well-being to the nation's future generations. And I find that incredibly exciting. We began the National Plan for Sport, Health and Wellbeing by looking at what is the state of play at the moment? How fit is this nation? How involved are people in terms of sport and different activities? And quite frankly, we found a very depressing picture. We found a situation where cross departments were not working together. Everybody was in a particular silo. The delivery of sport and recreation across the nation was fragmented. The access to funding was highly complicated. It was a matter of really knowing the system, whether you actually got resources or not, and that the process as a whole was over bureaucratic. And it was not surprising to us, therefore, that we found that the actual levels of physical activity, particularly for those underrepresented groups, particularly for women, particularly for ethnic minorities, for people with disabilities, that for all those groups, not simply because of the pandemic, but there has been a constant trend to actually become less and less active. And of course, we looked fundamentally to say, well, what is the government doing about this? Well, we did not wish to be terribly critical of what had happened in the past, because there's been some absolutely splendid initiatives and people are working very, very hard. And I must say that at local government level, local government, despite huge problems in terms of financing, local sports clubs, activity groups, and particularly some of the elite professional groups were delivering sport and recreation at a very, very high level, considering the implications and the problems which they had. But what we didn't have was a coordinated whole systems approach. And fundamentally, what our report is suggesting is that we have a national plan for sport and recreation, for health and well-being, and that it is a whole systems approach. It just doesn't depend on one particular department. It depends on all government departments, all local government organisations, and all the new fundamental organisations that have created in terms of mayoral structures, etc., to actually start to work together to boost activity rates and to make England and wider one of the most active nations in the world. And for that, we actually needed a national plan. Now, we actually saw the need to, first of all, make sure that as far as local authorities are concerned, they would have to have not as they do at the moment, a voluntary agreement to deliver recreation to their communities, but in fact to have a statutory requirement to provide and to maintain adequate facilities for sports and physical activity. And that needed to be backed up by funding from the Treasury. And we call for the establishment of a physical activity observatory to actually to create a centre for independent research, to make sure that the money which was being put in, and significant amounts of money have been put in by both local and central government, that in fact was firmly related to sport and recreational policy and to practice. Now, absolutely, current government structures are failing. And I don't believe that's through malice or lack of forethought. I think it's because there has never been an attempt to actually coordinate what government does in this particular area. But why we think it's important to have that coordination is not simply because it makes sense, but because in terms of the health of the nation, the future fitness of the nation, we are now reaching a crisis point where it is important that whether you are the youngest or the most elderly person, whatever your background, whatever your disabilities, whatever your needs, being physically fit helps your physical health and it helps your mental health. And to get that, government has got to set the scene. And we believe a national plan will do that. And you do that with better cross-government working, use and dissemination of resources, effective coordination and delivery of a plan. And we have suggested, in fact, we've done more than suggest, we have firmly recommended that we must have an Office for Health Improvement and Disparities should be renamed the Office for Health Promotion. We applaud the government for actually recognising that there are need for health improvement, there are need for tackling some of the disparities, but in terms of promoting health right across the nation, we actually need to make sure that this office has a great deal more than a title. We want it to be placed on a statutory footing so that in fact it is responsible to Parliament for its actions, for the resources it applies. And we want to make sure that it is at the centre of cross-governmental working. We recommend, therefore, that there should be a new Minister for Sport and Health and Wellbeing in the Department for Health and Social Care, to work alongside the Office for Health Promotion in developing and overseeing the national plan. Now, this is a bold move to actually take out of the Department for Culture, Media and Sport, the whole area of sport and recreation, and to place it in health, right at the centre of the nation's health programmes, at a time when health has been so fundamentally affected by the COVID pandemic, is a really brave move. But unless you have a Minister for Sport there, who in fact is going to sit within the Department for Health and Social Care, to have responsibility for sports policy, then we believe we will not make any progress. But of course, a minister alone will not coordinate across departments. And we have suggested, therefore, a strategic forum consisting of key national and local stakeholders and delivery bodies, and make that as broad as possible, chaired by the new minister, who will help design the national plan and, more importantly, take ownership of it and make sure that it is delivered right across the piece. A first time we would have a coordinated national plan to actually make this one of the healthiest, fittest nations on the planet. Now, by all means, different departments will have their own ideas. We fully recognise that at the moment education has a very key responsibility for ensuring that children remain active and fit and healthy. And this idea of physical literacy is an important element to us, and as is in fact the behavioural change which needs to take place right across the nation in every single area as we can. If we are to tackle the health inequalities which exist in this country, if we are to tackle the inactivity rates, which are quite shocking by any sort of standards, either internationally or indeed historically, then we really have got to take this issue seriously. Putting sport, health and fitness together right at the centre of government in terms of a national plan delivered and responsible to Parliament is one way this report will stand out in 10 years' time as being a landmark policy change. And hopefully it will be one which all the people who've contributed so excellently to it will feel perfectly satisfied.